Hey, what's up, card fighters? So originally I was gonna run this deck up at locals like one more time. Like I know I've been getting crazy with like the Bruce stuff lately, or like you guys are gonna see by the end of the week. I know we're not there yet, but you guys are gonna see that I've been getting a little bit crazy with the Bruce stuff lately, and I really just wasn't happy with the way the list was. It's not that it didn't work or like it wasn't doing what I built it to do, but it always felt like over, like, the grass is greener on the other side. I always felt like there was something better I could do, like I could optimize the list more. So I ultimately like ended up changing the list like four different times. But I did some final playtesting tonight. After work, I literally put in a couple hours and just like queued up the deck against Chronojet, like, let me see here, 7 times in a row. What was it? Eight? No, not seven. Like 7 different games in a row. Changing the deck, tweaking the deck here and there, and I think I pretty much have it exactly where I want the deck to be for this format. Now, set 10, this list could be completely different. I have no clue, but I feel like I've spent too much time on this deck, and there's so many other decks that I really want to cover. In like, I know we have like basically 2 months in set 9 format, but there's like a whole different like slew of decks that I want to cover in set 9 format. But anyways, let's get into the list. If you're smart, you already know what's in the deck just from the way I have it laid out. Good for you. Don't forget to don't forget to leave a like, a comment, and subscribe on your way out. But let's get into the list real quick. So important here is you wanna have the Diabolo starter in case you do have to call this out with Yamil, because you do require a full field of just Diabolos units to activate Bruce's ability. But getting on to the grade 3s. 3 copies of Vitamin Bruce, and then 1 Chalice. Originally, I took the Chalice out of the deck, but there was just like so many scenarios where like I wasn't seeing Persona Ride, and this deck really just like needs Persona Ride. It really needs that Persona Ride. Like, you could win without Persona Ride, but like just having Persona Ride just makes it so it's like really not an uphill battle. It's more of like, quote unquote, a fair fight. But yeah, 3 Bruce, 1 Chalice. There's really nothing much to talk about here. For Yamil, this is like low-key the best card in this deck, just because he's a card that for a counterblast and a soul charge, he's a card that converts into 2 cards on board. And that's just like it's really good in this deck. It sucks that he doesn't get the 10k power until you get Final Burst, but I guess it's a trade-off, considering, like, again, this is like what I would consider the best card in this deck. So you have to run Yamil at 4. He's your board builder, and I hope in the future, if we like more, I know we're getting more Bruce support, but if we're getting more Bruce support in the future, like Bushiroad, listen to me, like, I don't care about drawing cards. Like, I know this deck doesn't draw cards. That's fine. More board builders. Make me another board builder. Just one more board builder, and I'll be happy. But getting on to the rest of the grade 2s. 4 copies of Eden. So Eden's basically like, so at first what I was doing was I was like more focusing on like restanding Madonna, that like she's the chick from like Fighters, like not Festival Collection, that every time she swings she gets 10k, and I was focusing on restanding Madonna because on a Persona Ride turn you can make her final swing 63k without triggers, and that's really cool. But more often than not, this is just your win condition. Like, the Eden, like, restanding with a crit, especially if you won second, this is literally the win condition of the deck, especially if you hit crits, and you could stack the crits on the other line. So you could, like, choke your opponent at 4 or threaten lethal while your opponent's at 4. So it's very important that you do have this at 4. There's, like, a lot of different matchups where you actually do need this unit's crit pressure, and this needs to be the column that you restand. So, yeah, maxing out on the Edens, like, literally your win condition. Literally your win condition. And then this is basically just, like, so this is what I choose to, like, combat the early game with. What this card is, it's called Diabolos Madonna Meryl. You might not know what she does. She's a card from set 3, super old Diabolos card that never got used. I always saw the potential in this card, but it never. There was just like never an opportune moment to actually play it because there was always better Diabolos units. But anyway, her effect is when she attacks, she gets plus 2k to the end of battle. If you're in Final Rush, Soul Blast 1, give your Vanguard plus 10 until the end of turn. This ability is not once per turn, which you like this ability isn't once per turn. You'll never get it. You'll never get the chance to activate it again, and it's actually gonna like be helpful because of this deck's attack pattern. But this is like a really good restand target in the early game if you don't have Eden, because you could swing with this. Like let's say you made a column with this, even if you don't restand it. Like let's say like you went first, you can make a column with this, swing for 25. And then swing with your Vanguard is going to be minimum 23 or like maximum like 36 or like 30 with a boost. But this is like a really good card in the early game. Like I said, also that 2k really matters in the early game because it's able to make a 20k column which can hit over a defensive trigger on a 10k Vanguard. So that's why I did max out ultimately on the Merrills. I tried out Madonna Megan. I liked it. But just like making the column with Eden is just way more game pushing and pressure. I even tried out what's his name? Leonard. I tried out Leonard. Leonard was really good. It was really good at board breaking my opponent, like board breaking for like no reason. And the theory with Leonard was that I would more often than not soul charge a non-trigger than a trigger. But it was just like the 5k really hurt. In my opinion, like the 5k on Leonard really hurt. So I even tried Jared. Jared's another unknown card that like I could pull this guy up right now. Like this is literally all the cards that I tried. I even tried Jared. You know what this guy does? I'm gonna post those match videos up because I thought those are really good match videos. His effect is act once per turn. Counter Blast 1, Soul Blast 1. Give one of your Diabolos units plus 10 till the end of turn. And then his Final Rush ability is when he attacks, if I'm in Final Rush, your opponent can't intercept until the end of his battle. I wish this lasted for the whole turn, and I could have possibly just built the deck around Jared aggro. But because it doesn't, you're really only playing this for the 10k. And it was nice. It was cool. It made some really cool rush plays in the early, but you really exhausted your resources in the early. You exhausted your counterblast in the early, and you exhausted your soul in the early because it also does cost a soul. Even though you don't really use your soul like that, like in this build, I don't really use my soul like that. The only way I use my soul is for Jamil. But yeah, there was a point where like I just was running Jared instead of the Merrill. But the Merrill's ultimately better because she just costs 1 soul to give your Vanguard 10k and the 2k is free. But getting on to our grade 1s. 4 copies of Stephanie. She's like the best grade 1 in this deck. Like there is no one. Like, you can't at me. This is like the best grade 1 in this deck. It makes your Vanguard base 18 on your opponent's turn. It just protects your front row. Like, your front row is going to be sitting at, like, 15 to 20 to 25k on your opponent's turn, which means if they don't have conventional ways of removing your cards, attacking into them is more often not going to be a viable option because you can more often not just like one card guard them, or let's say like you hit a defensive front, which I did move from draws to playing fronts in this deck just because of the format, and the fronts helped way more than the draws did in playtesting. But yeah, 4 copies of her, really good on, you know, like making rearguard columns and really good behind your Vanguard. Like, I have 6 different Vanguard boosters in this deck. But getting on to the rest of them. 4 copies of Trish. The only reason you run Trish really is because she's a 10k shield and a 13k booster. Even though she can't intercept or like from the back row or anything like spontaneous like that. The only reason you play Trish is because like it's technically extra copies of Stephanie, and if you don't need the extra copies of Stephanie, they're 10k shields in hand. But more often than not, I prefer the Stephanie over the Trish. But you have to play her at 4, just because it's a better version of Steve. That's why you have to play her at 4. And then for the final grade 1, I'm playing 2 copies of Diabolos Madonna Mabel. I actually initially took this card out of my deck as well. I just opted for like a more, like, it was weird. I was going for like a more aggressive strategy, And I did take Mabel out of the deck, but this deck just really, like, not like it relies on the triple drive, but like having that extra +1 to hand, or even if your opponent has removal, there are times where like you can set up a board where, like, let's say like you're up against Chronojet, you know, they're gonna spin back a card. You could set up a Stephanie behind your Vanguard and then have like Jamils in the front row, and like, what are you gonna spin back, the Interceptor, or are you gonna spin back the Stephanie, making my Vanguard 18k? More often than not, they would have to retire the unit behind my Vanguard, or like remove the unit behind my Vanguard if they had access to removal. So me personally, it's just helpful having like basically 6 cards that I can stick behind my Vanguard. I could stick anything behind my Vanguard, but 6 cards I could stick behind my Vanguard, and that they're helping me in either I'm getting another drive, which means I'm getting another chance to check a trigger, or it's just making me a defensive 18k base, which helps me with guarding. Which, there are times where you can't commit a boost because you have to have a column. There are times where you can't afford to commit a booster behind your Vanguard. You could just go for the Meryl play, to whereas you swing with Meryl, you give 10k to your Vanguard. Now your Vanguard's 23 by itself, which means it's hitting a magic number. So you didn't necessarily need a booster if you didn't have one. At least that's my theory with it. There are times where the attack patterns are weird, because like Meryl, if you're attacking with Meryl, she's gonna be your weakest attack of the turn. Even if you Persona Road, she's only gonna be 35,000 behind in front of a 13k booster. She's only gonna be 35,000, so it's really weird. Sometimes it's better to not go for the Meryl restand, to swing with Meryl, give 10k to your Vanguard, and then swing with the other column. Like, let's say it's an Eden or a Jamil, that's just going to be, like, so much fatter. But it really depends on, like, the composition of your opponent's hand and, like, how much damage they're at. But, getting on to, like, the rest of the deck, like, the bones, the bare bones of the deck. 1 Blitz Order PG, it's mandatory in this format, especially since Messiah is coming out not too far away from now. It's just really mandatory because grade 4 decks are going to be rampant, and you need this just to be able to survive the Jet matchup. 1 Dark States OT, nothing much to talk about here. It's just really good in this deck. The Dark States OT is really good in every Dark States deck. There's never a real reason to not run it. 3 fronts. Like I said, I did try 7 draws. They were nice, but I was just lacking shield value, even though I did have a bunch of units, not shit, a bunch of units that did give me extra shield value, but I was still harping for that extra shield. And there was a lot of times where I checked the extra draw, and I'm like, man, if this was a crit, I'd be in so much better position right now. So that's why I ultimately dropped the draws down to 4. And there was a lot of times where I just like drew the draws, and I didn't really get to like resolve the draw triggers, or I would resolve like 1 draw trigger, and it didn't really feel like it was helping me, if that makes sense. But for that sole reason, we're going for like a purely offensive lineup. 4 into soul crits, 4 Diabolos crits. This is important. The front is also Diabolos. This is very important if you're ever in a situation where you need to call down triggers, because to proc your Vitamin Bruce's skill, all your units need to be Diabolos, which is why I also run the Diabolos heals. You could run effect heals. It's just like way better, and like regular heals are better right now in my opinion, and it's more consistent to just run maximize on the Diabolos triggers. The reason I'm running the Into Soul Crit, even though technically you don't need it, is there's times where you can't really set up a Meryl column, or there's times where I would call this crit behind my Vanguard to give 2k to a line, make that line 20, so that I could hit over a defensive, or like I could give 2k to an 8k so it could hit a 10k Vanguard. So there was fringe scenarios in the early game that I was pushing so hard that like committing this extra crit, and knowing the fact that like I can commit it, and even though it's not a Diabolos, it'll just like go away and not mess with my strategy, was like really actually crucial, low key. But that's basically the deck profile, guys. This deck, I would say it's It's a rogue warrior. It's most definitely a rogue warrior. It is very strong at what it does, but it is slightly piece reliant. Like slightly piece reliant. Like if you don't see Jamil, you're really like building your board with like the hard way, which you do more often than not. You either want to have your board like you want to have your board at like an F where you have one column and then you have your Vanguard column and then maybe you'll have like one rear guard in the front row. But more often than not, you want to have like the full board. You want to have like you want to have 5 rear guards on board because you benefit the most from boosting your units. But it's a rogue warrior, guys. It really does take a good pilot, like a really like, and that's the antithesis of rogue decks, is that you have to try so hard to win with rogue decks, and if you make one mistake, if you make like one misplay, that costs you the game versus playing a meta deck. Like I've said this before in my I forget the name of it. It was like how to play rogue decks video, or like the things you need to know about rogue decks. You guys should check it out. It's actually still like a really relevant video to this day. But it does take a really good pilot. You have to know when to conserve your cards, when to go ham. Like theoretically you could say this about any deck, but it's even more crucial in this deck. You have to know when to hold back and when to just hit your foot on the gas like full throttle. But anyways, guys, this has been really like longer than I expected it to be. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. I will be posting my Vanguard deck as well. It's not that I'm giving up on the deck. It's just like this deck, I feel like I've gotten it to a very good standing and comfortable standing that I feel like if I work on it anymore, it's going to be like an injustice to my time considering the other decks that I have lined up for you guys to see. But anyways, again, later.